Thank you for joining the Men in Scarlet and Gray Live podcast number 8. This is our postseason with Chip Minnick. How you doing today, Chip?
I'm doing very well, Shannon. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. We're going to discuss, catch up on some news. Our Wisconsin game, the Sugar Bowl, the national championship game, and Chip and I both got to enjoy the nice warm horseshoe on Saturday, the celebration. So we're going to discuss a lot of things. So why don't you go ahead and take it away with what you thought about the Wisconsin beatdown?
Well, I mean, it's again, it's been such a long time, since the last time we had our podcast with the holidays and everything, and I remember our last podcast we were talking about the Big Ten championship in Wisconsin, and it just seems so eerie to think about the fact that it was such a deflating victory by, obviously anytime you can win the game over that team up north, there's a great deal of exhilaration naturally, but going into the Big Ten championship without JT Barrett, obviously there was a lot of concern. Speaking for myself, I seem to recall, and obviously our listeners can contradict me and correct me if I am mistaken, which I have been known to be from time to time, as my wife periodically reminds me. But I seem to recall that I thought Ohio State would prevail against Wisconsin like a 21-17. I thought Cardale Jones was going to have to play more than just running the ball. That I thought that they had to give Cardale Jones the full scope of the offense. And my biggest concern, as I recall, was I really thought Melvin Gordon was for sure going to go 100, maybe 125 yards, give or take. And I thought if he goes north of 150, that's where Ohio State's going to be in some serious hot water against Wisconsin. You look back on it, and again, it was a complete domination from start to finish. When it was all said and done, Ohio State was able to hold Melvin Gordon, who, if he's not going to be a first-round draft choice this coming April in the 2015 NFL draft, bare minimum he's going to be a second-round draft choice. He's going to be a high draft choice, is what I'm trying to say. They held Melvin Gordon to 76 yards, only just barely under 3 yards a carry. They completely stifled Wisconsin offensively. So that 59-0 was just what the doctor ordered in terms of not only from a fan's confidence perspective, but I think that's definitely what sealed the deal with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. The fact that they completely dominated Wisconsin in the manner that they did in front of a national television audience, that's what sealed the deal for Ohio State to be that fourth seed in the college football playoff for this season.
I agree. I mean, I'll discuss the Art Briles controversy a little bit later. But, yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. And Cardell, he had one heck of a game. I mean, he ended up being the MVP of the game, and nobody's seen, the strength that he had with his arm in the way he was just going to be threading passes and just throwing that ball all over the field. Like you said, stopping Gordon the way they did was just phenomenal. I was worried that, Gordon was going to kind of, go off and have a great game, but they did a number on him. I mean, I still see it, Bosa picking up Gordon and just while he's running, picking him up and just throwing him backwards. It was an amazing thing to see. I mean, you could tell that, you know, Coach Myers always talked about he's wanted a hungry team, he's always wanted an angry team, and that's what he got for the Big Ten championship. And they showed up, and they put a hurting on Wisconsin.
Well, not only something, Shannon, that you just mentioned about Coach Meyer always wanting a hungry team and an angry team. And again, we're talking about something that happened. I mean, it's weird to think about, at the beginning of December. It almost feels so long ago. But I make a point of listening to Coach Meyer's press conference on Mondays during the season on, just over the internet on 97.1, since they cover it, and it was one of the if it was I think it was the very last question one of the Ohio State beat reporters asked Coach Meyer something to the effect of how do you feel or how does your team feel about being the underdog? And I can't remember precisely how the question was asked, but it was essentially how do you feel about being the underdog? And I remember Coach Meyer said, "We're the underdog." Just kind of that surprise that what do you mean we're the underdog? We're undefeated, or no, excuse me, we're undefeated in league play. Let me remember that Ohio State did have one loss, but all the local media did, all the beat reporters did is I immediately thought when I was listening to that was you have just given him that little burr to put under the saddle of the Ohio State players, whatever kind of psychological motivation that they may have been lacking or any kind of confidence boost that they needed. They just either intentionally or unintentionally gave that to Coach Meyer because he is all about playing the disrespect card, playing the nobody thinks that you can do it card, whatever kind of psychological motivation is necessary. The Ohio State beat reporters, I'm grateful to them for doing it, but they did that by just simply asking the question about how do you feel about being the underdog going into the Big Ten championship.
Oh yeah, and it was impressive, and that was, I think that was the. I mean, you can start seeing the process as far as the defense getting better and everything. And becoming that angry. We're better than you think we are, and we're not the underdogs. But I think that was pretty much the rebirth of, what they call the silver bullet defense. And like you said, Meyer, got that team hyped up, and I mean, you figure Ohio State had what 558 yards total offense to Wisconsin's 258. They had Ohio State, three interceptions. I mean, you turn the ball over, you're not going to win a game unless you're Ohio State, apparently, which we'll get to later in that.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, that was just complete dominance across the board, and like you said, whether he knew that they were, the underdogs or not, maybe he played that off, but he got that team, fired up to show that, why are we the underdogs? We're the king of the Big Ten, and we haven't lost a Big Ten game in, 3 years, and you're going to put us as the underdogs. How dare you? And it got them fired up pretty good.
Absolutely, and then not only I agree with you that it was kind of the rebirth of the Silver Bullets. I don't want to call it a rebirth, but it was definitely this was the first, and we're going to be talking about him here momentarily. May as well just kind of bring it up now. This was I guess you would say the dawn of the feeding the Zeke.
Oh,
Ezekiel Elliott. Obviously, Cardale Jones was naturally deserving of the MVP award for the Big Ten championship. Who would have expected somebody making their first career start, in such a pivotal, crucial game for Ohio State's postseason hopes, having such a great game. But Ezekiel Elliott with that 81-yard run in the first quarter, he had ultimately when this was the first of his 200+ yard games. Feed the Zeke. This was arguably, like I don't want to say anytime you go over 200 yards, it's not poor, but this was probably like in comparison to the other two that we're going to talk about, the least productive.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about some of the running backs in the Big Ten as far as Gordon and Abdullah, and why can't I think of it? I'm trying to blank. We played,
Cobb,
yeah, Cobb, and
Minnesota,
what's his name from Indiana.
Coleman.
Yeah,
Coleman from
Indiana,
sorry. And Langford from Michigan State.
Right. And you never once heard Zeke's name brought up in that whole conversation of all these running backs, and then all of a sudden it was like, who are these other guys? It's just the Ezekiel Elliott show. He came to play, and like I heard recently somebody saying that if Woody Hayes was alive, he would be just ecstatic with the last 3 games for Ohio State. Just, the ground and pound and the way Ezekiel ran, and just, you know, somebody I seen on Twitter that one of the scouts was saying he's a bowling ball.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's true to form. The
absolutely.
kid's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's again, it's the kind of thing, we've got a tremendous off season to look forward to, and uh, just kind of glancing at the stats. Obviously Curtis Samuel is the primary backup, but Bryante Dunn came in at the tail end, and he arguably could have had a touchdown if not for being substituted for Curtis Samuel at the tail end. Bryante Dunn was averaging almost 10 yards a carry himself. So that rushing attack was the first of something very, very special in terms of the way Ohio State concluded the season. So, at this point, like I said, 59-0. There's not much more you can say in terms of complete dominance that Ohio State had over Wisconsin to secure their spot in the college football playoff.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think it was deservingly so. I don't care what Art Briles had to say. He came out right afterwards, and he was crying because the Big 12, with their lack of a championship, or championship game, they awarded TCU and Baylor both co-champions, was kind of cost them. But we play football down here in the South. But if you play football down in the South and you lost to a northern team, and that northern team only lost to 2 teams, and both those teams were in the national championship game. So, please sit down, Art Briles. But moving on, talking about the Wisconsin game, was the big matchup that everybody in Buckeye Land Buckeye Nation was looking forward to, and that was the Alabama game in the Sugar Bowl in Louisiana. That was the matchup that everybody was looking for. All the SEC thought that, everybody in the whole country, all the national pundits thought that this was going to be a walkthrough and a cake run for Alabama, that there was no way that the Ohio State Buckeyes was going to be able to hang with, Nick Saban's Crimson Tide, and they've got speed, and they've got depth, and they've got strength, and they've got athletes. There's no way that the Ohio State Buckeyes can hang with them. How'd you like that game?
Oh, I'm still basking in it.
Yes.
I will freely admit, and again, I am open to critique, and even from you on this one. I will freely admit, initially, when the matchup was made, I was happy for it, because just like in real life, if you have a bully, you have to, at some point, you have to stand up for yourself. And I figured, all right, this is it. Not that Alabama has done any of the bullying, mind you, against Ohio State. Realistically, it was Florida and LSU, back after the 2006 and 2007 seasons. But I've always said, to get that SEC bully, get to regain respect, Ohio State would have to defeat an SEC team, and I thought nothing better than the Sugar Bowl, because the fact is this was arguably in Alabama's backyard. So the critique and criticism that I invite, not only from you but from others, is that when the matchup was initially announced, I don't want to say that I said, well, Ohio State's going to definitely lose. My confidence was not that high. And I just want to explain, here's what my thinking was at that point was, yes, Ohio State was coming off a dominating victory. However, I thought, with a month to prepare, Nick Saban is widely considered to be one of the better, not only just head coaches, but one of the better defensive masterminds in college football. I recalled how Alabama had defeated Urban Meyer's Florida team with Tim Tebow in the SEC championship. I thought Ohio State defensively would have difficulty slowing down Amari Cooper. So at the beginning of December, I thought, this is going to be, I think it's going to be a good game, but I think Ohio State's going to have more and more of a challenge as it as the game wore on, and I thought, okay, as long as Ohio State plays well, I'll be okay. The metamorphosis for me was, again, I want to give credit to the beat writers, that since I did not have the opportunity to be in New Orleans during the game, was on Twitter. People like Bo Bishop, other beat writers, they would constantly, I would see on Twitter statements that Urban Meyer seems very calm, he seems very relaxed, he seems very loose. And at one point, I seem to recall Bo Bishop saying something to the effect of, Urban Meyer knows something. Like he knows something. Like all the beat writers were talking about how relaxed and calm he was. So on New Year's Eve, with some of my high school friends, again, some very proud Ohio State graduates, I remember one of my friends saying, "Hey, can they do it?" I'm like, "No, I think they're gonna do it. I think they're gonna. I think they know something. Urban Meyer knows that he can attack that secondary, and it kind of bore out. Ultimately with that victory that Ohio State had. I'm still, like I said, I'm still basking in it. I was it was almost impossible for me to get to sleep the night of January 1st, and I can tell you there was nowhere else I wanted to be except listening to the Paul Feinbaum show the afternoon of January 2nd to listen to all the caterwauling and misery, and the just the complete all the excuse making from Alabama fans that called into the Paul Feinbaum show.
I totally agree. I tell you what, during the season, the one thing that changed for me, I remember before the Michigan State game, I believe you and I, if I'm not mistaken, I think you and I were the two that went against Ohio State, and we thought that Michigan State was going to win.
That is correct. I admit when I'm wrong.
Right. And my thing on that was, after watching that game, that was a turning point with me. Now, before the Alabama game, I had some of the same concerns that you had. Can Ohio State shut down Cooper? And I thought, well, look at who we have as a co-defensive coordinator. We've got Chris Ash. He runs a really good secondary. If anybody's going to be able to stop, Cooper, it's going to be him. Cooper's probably going to get maybe 100 to 200 yards. It could be a bend but don't break defense as long as he doesn't get into the end zone. I really wasn't worried about the rushing, especially after the Wisconsin game and we shut down Gordon. And I think in all honesty, except for the running back from Georgia, which I can't think of his name, that got hurt and he was suspended, then it got hurt. I think basically a majority of running backs, and this is just my opinion, in the Big Ten were better than the running backs in the SEC. I don't think the SEC had a very powerful running game from anybody, not like the Big Ten had. With that being said, I thought, shut down Cooper, we'll be all right. But going into the game and the start of the game, and next thing you know, you're down, 21-3, because one, you can't get into the end zone, and two, you've got, 2 or 3 turnovers at that point in time. I was a little concerned. But right. Like you said, watching Urban on that sideline, cool, calm, and collected, and just watching Cardell, he just makes a mistake, and Urban's sister, hey, what happened? Hey, I messed up, blah, 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 or somebody else. Cardell seemed like anything that happened to him, he forgot about it as soon as he came off the sideline and he sat down on that bench, which was evident in that Oregon game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when they were down 21-6, and something that you referenced about not getting into the end zone, I'll address that here momentarily. Again, I was at just to kind of, I was at my sister's. Watching the game. Again, my sister's a proud Ohio State graduate. On commercial breaks, you got to see ignoramuses like Clay Travis on Twitter talking about how this is like a python that is slowly starting to squeeze the life out of its victim, or something to that effect. And it looked pretty grim to be down 21-6, and when Ohio State, they were able to get a drive, early, I don't want to say early, but in the second quarter, behind Ezekiel Elliott had a 3-yard run to make it 21-13, and obviously the crucial play was the Evan Spencer, the double reverse Evan Spencer pass to Michael Thomas, to pull them within, a point to make it 21-20. If there's a criticism that I believe should be directed to Coach Meyer, and obviously he thought of it between the Sugar Bowl and the National Championship, was on two separate occasions. First being that Ezekiel Elliott had that nice long run that got them within first and goal, and then later on in the first half, there was a long pass to Devin Smith that got them to first and goal. On both of those occasions, instead of just lining up under center, they did the shotgun snap to Cardale, the one where Cardale bobbled the snap. But the point is that they were within, anytime you're doing a shotgun snap, you're giving up 5 yards. You know what I'm saying? Like you're basically negating your own advantage. Like they were, I think, on like the 2 or the 3 on maybe on both of those occasions, and the next thing you know, it's like, okay, you're basically on the 8. Fortunately, Ohio State was able to at least get points out of it, but yeah, there was some major concerns when they were down 21-6, and then as soon as in the third quarter when Devin Smith caught that touchdown pass from Cardale Jones to put them, they never trailed they were ahead the majority of the second half. But something else that you said that I think needs to be made abundantly clear is that Alabama, they've got some, I know we're going to talk about recruiting next week and about the players that Ohio State's bringing in, but Landon Collins is a junior who declared for the NFL draft, is a projected first-round draft choice, I believe, for the 2015 NFL draft. And that the one play that just sticks in my mind, I know we're going to talk about the national championship here in a minute, is when Cardale Jones had a long quarterback scramble up the middle, and he just lowered his shoulder and basically trucked, a projected first-round draft choice at safety, with Landon Collins. I mean, he ran him over. So if anything, I look at this game, like I said, I can't stop gushing about it. I've made a point of kind of circling when it's going to be available on DVD, to buy it so I can enjoy it during these bitterly cold winter months when I have to go without football. I'll never ever get tired of watching Ohio State vanquish an SEC bully like Alabama.
I've got it on DVR, so. But the biggest, when they came back in that first half and they went into the locker room only down by 1 point and having the possession, first possession of the second half, you thought, all right, as long as they go down and score, because they were moving the ball, as long as they go down and score, I think Ohio State's, they're going to take this game. They went down and scored, and then all of a sudden, Alabama's got the ball, and then they did that drop back with Steve Miller, and he had that nice 41-yard interception. That was a thing of beauty. But one of the biggest keys to me was when I don't remember exactly when it was, but the ball was basically like on the 1, or half-yard line.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And Cardale went to go back, to throw or something, and he was basically stopped for a safety. Actually happened a couple of times, but one time, I mean, he just came bouncing off of people and got 2-yard gain off of it. Right. It was like, you are not going to stop us. And it was like, all right, yeah, the Big Ten's what now?
Exactly. Well, I mean, since you mentioned Steve Miller, it was one of those things where, again, earlier in the game, Derrick Henry of Alabama, and he's a big guy. I mean, he had roughly 100 yards. I think he was, like 95 yards, whatever. And that's part of what the criticism that's directed towards Lane Kiffin is, like, oh, they should have kept running the ball and whatever. Steve Miller was getting blown off the ball during running plays, but then he completely redeemed himself with that interception return for a touchdown. And what was, I thought, just again, Ohio State was they were ahead the second half. Not only was it timely, but you want to talk about where it was kind of very anxious moments was when Ohio State, Cameron Johnston punted the ball. I'm sure you can recall what I'm about to say. Punted the ball from the end zone, and it took a bad bounce back towards Ohio State's side, and Alabama was, I think they were on like the 20 or 25 or something. And the very next play, Blake Sims was intercepted by Von Bell. You know what I'm saying? It's like every time in the second half when Ohio State, when their backs were to the wall, like you just said, either Cardale would fight for an inch or a yard, to just, maintain possession of the ball. Steve Miller with the crucial interception, Von Bell with the crucial interception. And then, obviously, in the fourth quarter, I mean, you want to talk about a thing of beauty, feeding the Zeke. And the unsung hero, since you say you've got it on DVR, and I would say this to anyone who listens to this podcast, the crucial play, a player on that, and I completely agree with Coaser, because Evan Spencer comes in on that play. You can see it. He comes in and he blocks down on the linebacker, which is what basically opens up the hole that Ezekiel Elliott took off for that 85-yard run.
Yeah, no, I mean, you cannot give enough credit to what Evan Spencer's meant to this team. And it just stinks that he's a senior, but hey, he's definitely one of the unsung heroes. Just like the improvement of that offensive line. I mean, you come into this game and everybody's like, there's no way that Ezekiel Elliott's going to be able to run on Alabama. They got like one of the top run defenses in the league, and Zeke gets 230 yards. I think that's the first time that anybody's had 200 or more against Nick Saban since he's been head coach at Alabama.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
So it's like, yeah, you guys keep, the Big Ten might have had a, down couple of weeks, and they might have had, not that great of a year, but I'll tell you what, Big Ten, going 6-5 because of Ohio State's 2 wins in bowls, and the SEC going 7-5. Big Ten's coming back, buddies.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you mentioned Art Briles earlier, and to me that was just complete poetic justice that Michigan State, who was down to Baylor, and again, it was in the Cotton Bowl. Baylor is from Texas, so this was a game in their backyard. Michigan State was down, and they rallied to win that game. All of the complaints, all of the issues. I've been a longtime proponent of a playoff. The idea that being able to settle games on the field, and that's essentially what Ohio State was able to do since they were in the playoff. Art Briles should have just kept his mouth shut and concentrated on preparing for Michigan State. Like the way how, I want to give credit to Gary Patterson and Texas Christian, because they went out, they completely walloped Ole Miss, in their bowl game. So I have sympathy for the Big 12 that they were excluded from the playoff, but to a certain point. And that certain point was completely, I completely sprinted past it as soon as Art Briles started complaining about, like we should have been in instead of Ohio State. And then they couldn't even, Ohio State defeated Michigan State in their home stadium soundly. Michigan State went down to the Cotton Bowl, which was arguably in Baylor's backyard, and Baylor couldn't take care of business.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, and the worst thing about it was not even just the Art Briles talking before the game, like right after the season ended and crying. The crying that he was still doing up to a couple of weeks ago with this whole, I talked to some members and it was an 8-4 vote. Well, I put on Twitter, if the 8 people, chose Ohio State, those are pretty smart fans. Not just because I'm an Ohio State fan, just because of the way Ohio State ran through the table and did what they did. if four people were going against, Ohio State and one another team in there, maybe TCU, got robbed. Maybe they were deserving because they are, a really good football team. I'd never watched a TCU game this year except for the bowl game, so I'm not going to sit there and say, they didn't deserve to get in or anything. Maybe they did get robbed, but you didn't hear Patterson crying or anything. But still, after you lose to Michigan State, you're going to still sit here and cry about how you felt that you got robbed about not getting in. It boggles my mind.
Well, I'm just gonna share a rumor since we're talking about the other teams in the playoffs and the Big Ten and everything. The rumor that I read, which seemed to make a lot of sense, after Ohio State was voted in, was that the reason why Texas Christian was voted third and Florida State was fourth going into the final poll was that there was a belief that Ohio State was fifth, going into the final poll, was there was a belief that Ohio State was going to lose, and the hope was that Florida State would lose to Georgia Tech in their, in the ACC championship. So therefore, if both of those teams lost, they could elevate Baylor, and it was, basically it was like they were hoping that Ohio State was going to lose. As soon as Ohio State not only won, but won convincingly, and the fact that Texas Christian had lost to Baylor head-to-head, and the fact that Baylor had such a weak non-conference schedule, that kind of forced the College Football Playoff Committee's hand in saying, listen, we can't put Baylor in with such a weak non-conference when Ohio State won so convincingly. Like I said, it's strictly a rumor. I'm just repeating because it seems very, very plausible to me, is that they were trying to be prepared in the event that Ohio State did not come through in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I agree, and it is what it is. It's over and done with.
Right.
Our Browse, please sit down and shut up.
Right. Yeah, I mean, getting back to what we've been talking about, the Sugar Bowl, without a doubt, it's not as I'm not going to say that I savor it as much as the 2003 Fiesta Bowl, championship game, over Miami, or even the national championship, the 2015 national championship game that we're going to talk about here momentarily. But it's up there. I mean, I will be forever basking in the victory of in the 2015 Sugar Bowl over Alabama, maybe because it was 8 years in the making of just finally getting that SEC. I don't want to say that it's been buried and put to rest, because we all know that ESPN, they've got an investment to protect and promote. But it was. I mean, I seriously, I've got the Paul Feinbaum show. That podcast is saved as one of my favorites. The picture of Joey Galloway with Mark May wearing Ohio State Sugar Bowl champion garb. I definitely love that picture. All that stuff. I mean, I will forever treasure this victory because it was 8 years in the making.
Speaking of that, the wonderful, the almighty, the know-it-all, the Mr. I'm never wrong, Mr. Buckeye hater, Mark May. The greatest thing that I enjoyed, besides the victory, obviously, was the post game. And when they sat there, and I forget.
I think it was Ezekiel.
It was Ezekiel staring, standing next to Mark May and just staring him down. And when Urban's sitting there at that desk and Mark May starts talking, that look that Urban was giving him, like, how dare you even speak to me? If I wasn't required to even answer this question right now, I wouldn't even speak to you, which is kind of funny because in some of the celebrations, I guess they made a video to send to Mark May, and he was the inspiration behind it. So, I mean, it just goes to show that look that he was given, like, dude, you just need to shut your pie hole. How do you like me now?
Exactly.
That was the greatest thing. But then, Mark May goes on and says, there's no way that Ohio State could beat Oregon. So, speaking of there's no way that Ohio State can beat Oregon,
Right.
let's
Right.
talk about the Oregon game.
Well, I'm going to say right now, I mean, kind of the theme that I kind of like the thread that I had is like each one of the subsequent victories from the Big Ten championship to the Sugar Bowl, I looked at these as I reflect upon it as these were springboard games to obviously the next best thing, but psychologically it was the kind of thing where Ohio State, they lost JT Barrett, they needed to have the confidence that Cardale could do it. As soon as Cardale came out and walloped Wisconsin, all right, now we got to, it's like we've got to get this SEC bully taken care of. As soon as they did that, I really believe in my heart and soul that Ohio State, in their mind, they thought we're not going to lose to Oregon. I don't care how fast of a tempo they run. I don't care how great of a player Marcus Mariota is supposed to be. We're a team of destiny now, and we are going to run the ball down their throats, exert our will upon them, and control the line of scrimmage to our content. Because I will say that, if there's a critique I have of the college football playoff is by having the game on a Monday night, it kind of made for an interesting Tuesday morning the next day at work.
Oh,
However,
God, yes.
however, I never once, even when, in talking about this with some of my other friends, I never ever even watching the game initially with my wife and kids. My children are you know they wanted to watch the game because they saw how with the Sugar Bowl how much fun that was. But unfortunately, they had school the next day, so we can only let them stay up through basically through the end of the first quarter. Even when Oregon came out, went down the field with I know that there was that potentially a fumble that was correctly ruled to not be a fumble because Mariota's knee was down and everything. I never ever thought, all right, Ohio State's not going to be able to to be able to handle this. I kept saying they're going to figure this out, and then as the game wore on, and I keep going back to the feed the Zeke, that even when Oregon got within a point, I kept thinking like, all right, you just got to run the ball. All you got to do is just run the ball. I was more angry at Ohio State for turning the ball over. I mean, inexplicably with the Jalen Marshall reception that turned into an interception, or the Corey Smith earlier with that deep pass and was going to be in scoring position. The next thing you know, he fumbled it, or that Cardale, I want to be Jameis Winston, making a fumble pass, all three of those, like I never ever thought, all right, we're in trouble ever. I always thought we're just got to settle down and just start feeding the Zeke.
Well, that's what's funny. That was the only time that I yelled was in that third quarter, I believe, when they gave up what was it at that time? What is their fourth turnover? And I think that was after the Winston impression fumble that
Yeah, Cardale, yeah.
that Cardale had, and I was just like, you're kidding me. I mean,
Right.
you already know that Oregon's a team that feasts off of turnovers, and he goes and does the exact. I mean, I was like, it's the exact same thing that just happened last week that Florida State did.
Right.
And I was sitting there screaming at the TV like, you cannot beat this team. I don't care if you keep turning the ball over the way that you're turning the ball over. But you're already, Oregon's already in their backyard. I forget exactly what yard line it was. They were pretty close already, to their end zone. I just can't remember what yard line it was where that turnover happened at. But to only give up a field goal,
Right.
after that second turnover and made it 21-20, I just looked at my wife and I was like, "We got this." And she was like, "You sure?" I was like, "Yeah." And like you said, feed the Zeke. And it was just, I mean, something just told me that you've got 4 or 5 turnovers here, and you're up by 1 point against a very potent offense that averaged, 47.2 points a game, I believe it was.
Right.
I mean, yeah, okay. I did a position comparison between, the Buckeyes and the Ducks, and yeah, all right, you lost a wide receiver because of, now what you're calling a drug controversy, because all of a sudden, because it's not Ohio State, kids should be able to use drugs. Um, you're without your best corner that was, out for the Rose Bowl, and you lost one of your best special teamers for, failing a drug test also. And, you got all these players that are out, but Ohio State's under, I mean, sorry, but I can't call Cardale a third string quarterback, not because of the way he played, but he's always been second string no matter the way you look at it. But that's, whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. Since you mentioned um, the turnover that was they were held to a field goal, a crucial play during that sequence of events was, and I can't remember the tight end's name for Oregon, but Mariota tried to hit the tight end in the back of the end zone, and Eli Apple pushed the
Yes.
tight end out. That was a crucial play because that was a third down. And then the next thing you know, okay, well, Oregon had to kick the field goal. Like you said, they were down a point. I think what was, you mentioned earlier and referenced the silver bullets earlier. I thought what was a crucial mistake by Oregon early in the game was when they had first and goal near the in the red zone, and on third down they tried to run Mariota, and he was stopped short of the goal line, and it was fourth down, and instead of kicking the field goal, taking the points, going for it with I believe it was Thomas Tyner, I'm not sure, one of the Oregon running backs trying to run it, and he was stopped short of the goal line. I thought that was a huge coaching mistake by Oregon. I'm not saying that it would have necessarily changed the outcome, but you referenced the idea of the silver bullets. I think the fact that Oregon, they came in ballyhooed as this unstoppable offense. Nobody would be able to keep pace. How are you going to shut them down? The fact that Ohio State defensively was able to stone them at the point of attack, say you're not getting anything, that was a huge psychological lift early in the game that I think helped Ohio State stem the tide, and it just turned into, for all of the hoopla about Oregon with their pace that they like to run at offensively, and the fact that they have all these like outfits that like different uniforms that they like to run. I think somebody either posted either another blogger or somebody said, like, instead of investing so much in new uniforms, how about Oregon invest in some bench presses for their defense? Because they got, you could see it. I mean, Shannon, you mentioned how you have this on DVR. You can go back. You can see the Oregon defenders. They were basically waving, like waving to the sidelines. I need a break. I need, reinforcements. They were getting blown up at the line of scrimmage, at the point of attack, with that offensive line. If there's one thing that if I look back on it, I said it on the podcast months ago when I was at that Virginia Tech loss, and how much of a debacle that was, how painful that was to see and be in the stands in Ohio Stadium. If you had told me in a few months this offensive line is going to be the best in college football and is going to be competing for the national championship, you would have been looking to lock me away and throw away the key, because there's the transformation, the kudos and praise that should be heaped towards Ed Warner and that offensive line for their development, which allowed for, as I said earlier, feeding the Zeke. I mean, he had 246 yards. So it was basically, it's like, saving the best for last. He had 230 against Alabama, 220 against Wisconsin. I mean, he had essentially almost 700 yards give or take, almost 800 in a 3-game span.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree. And I was listening to I decided to try to stream some Oregon radio stations, beforehand, the weekend before the game, just to see what they were saying. And one of the shows I was listening to, I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was, but they said that, when the teams came off their bus and got into the hotel, that if there was a trophy for that, Ohio State would have walked away with the victory hands down. That they were astonished the size of all the Ohio State players. They were like, you sit there and watch these teams on TV and you're like, they look normal. And then all of a sudden these players come up next to you and it was like, Houston, we have a problem here. They were like, our guys are nowhere near as big as this. I mean, their strength and conditioning program that they have at Ohio State, they were like, that is a phenomenal program that they have going on there. And it showed because, like you said, the team kept getting better and better. Hats off to that offensive line and the transformation, and congratulations to Ed for, what he's done. I mean, this is only the third or fourth time he's built an offensive line, and each time he
right.
builds them, they're great. I mean, congratulations to him and his promotion of being, the offensive coordinator. It just, I mean, it was a great thing to see. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you think about the journey, that to me is, I guess, if I had to summarize, before we talk about the national championship celebration, and when I say the journey, I'm thinking of, not only, for this season, but, a lot of the seniors that are hopefully leaving Ohio State for bigger and better things, either in the NFL or in their post-football lives. People like Michael Bennett, Jeff Hireman, Devin Smith, Evan Spencer, Daryl Baldwin. A lot of those guys, like I think of like Evan Spencer and Devin Smith, they signed with Ohio State, thinking that Jim Tressel was going to be their head coach, and then months into their careers at Ohio State, their football careers at Ohio State, Jim Tressel resigned, and their freshman season in 2011, Luke Fickell, while being under continual and complete assault through the radio, through the internet, through television, through the media, was under complete assault of just trying to keep Ohio State's football program afloat until Urban Meyer was hired in November of 2011. So those seniors, there's so much that when you think about the roller coaster of basically playing for 3 different head coaches, where their career started, the coming off of a 6 and 7 season when they were freshmen, to be able to culminate their Ohio State careers with a national championship. I mean, like I said, I'm still kind of basking in from just the complete metamorphosis that the program has taken ever since Coach Meyer has arrived. But my thoughts cannot help but go back to where things were, how bleak and how dark that period seemed to be, when Coach when Coach Tressel was forced to resign. That's what I think of, in terms of just the journey, like how through all the difficulties Ohio State was able to come out of it as the national championship after such a very bitter period just a few short years ago.
And that's a great point. And if since the Tressel era, I mean, this was the only class that hadn't won a bowl game yet.
Right.
And to come out this year and to win 2 bowl games. I mean, the Sugar Bowl and the National Championship Bowl, basically, if you want to call it the bowl game or whatever. But
right.
I mean, to not win, not to win any Big Ten championship games, or not games, but conference, the championship games. to not winning any bowl games, and here you go and you win your conference championship handedly. You go in, SEC country, and you handedly, I mean, I don't care if the score was only 7 points or whatever, but if it wasn't for turnovers, you weren't stopping that offense. You handedly, beat Alabama, and then to turn around and just destroy Oregon. It was a great send off for that class, and that class deserved it.
Absolutely. Like I said, I mean, when talking about, you know, we were, in gratitude to the seniors that finished the journey. I can't help but think of how, I'm happy for Coach Tressel that he's been able to move on from, from being the head coach at Ohio State. He's now the president at Youngstown State University. He's been elected to the College Football Hall of Fame. How great was it that Coach Tressel was out for the coin toss for the national championship, with some of the players that he recruited? Like that had to have been a very poignant moment, something that he had to obviously, had to enjoy being able to be there to witness Ohio State win the national championship, even though he is no longer associated with Ohio State, to be able to see those seniors conclude their playing careers the way that they did.
No, I agree, and I mean, I can't even put it into words. Just, I can't even think of the feeling that those seniors had, and what everything that they went through. It was great. It was great seeing them basking in the joy of all their hard work, and their hard work actually paying off and meaning something. It was a great send off for them.
Well, speaking of send offs, the national championship celebration. How's that for a segue?
That's perfect. That is
All right.
perfect. I mean, that nice, warm,
yeah,
just
Well, I will say this much: I attended. Great. I'm proud to say that I attended the national championship celebration 12 years ago, as well as this one this past week. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to hook up with you, and I do apologize. You have it on on record, on this podcast for not meeting up with you down in Columbus. But for those of you that were not there, even though I'm an Ohio boy, born and bred, and you would think that, okay, I'm used to the cold. It was cold. It was about 27 degrees. I was with my best friend from high school who happens to live in the area. He was kind enough to let me spend the night with he and his family, and he and we got down there in plenty of time. And one of the things I could not believe was, I thought that I was well prepared for it. I was, heavy, wool socks and all that kind of stuff, and hat and gloves and all that kind of stuff. Couldn't believe the number of people who brought their small children. I mean, before the podcast started, referencing the fact that I saw people with infant carriers and, people, walking around with kids that were toddler age. And even, at one point, Coach Meyer and Joey Bosa said, reference the fact, like, you people must be nuts. Like, it's freezing out here. What are you doing out here? But I think it just speaks to the depth of, the loyalty that, that the fans have, and the love that the fans, the love that the fans have for Ohio State football. It was impressive to see, and impressive to be a part of for the second time in 12 years.
I didn't get to go to the other national championship celebration. So this was my first. Got to pop my national championship celebration cherry because, being a Cleveland fan, I'm never going to enjoy that, I don't think.
Well, that's a podcast for another day. And
exactly.
Might need some multiple therapists there.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the Cavs. So, come on, Cavs. But seriously, And like my hats off to Gene Smith being the MC. I thought he did a tremendous job. And Urban mentioned, that he wanted to have the celebration inside the shot because it was warmer. And Gene Smith told him, "You don't understand these fans. We have to have it at the shoe." Well, the crowd that showed up, I've heard 45,000, I've heard 50,000. So we'll say between 45 and 50,000 people showed up. You weren't fitting all that in the shot.
Right. Well,
So, I mean, I'm glad that as much as I froze and I'm used to working outside, so I'm used to the cold, but there was just something, maybe just because you stood the whole time. Once they came walking out onto the field, everybody was standing the whole time. But I don't know, just the concrete was just so cold or what, but that place it felt like it was 10 times colder inside there than it was actually outside. And it was like, wow.
yeah, yeah. If anything, just to kind of, and I'm sure you would agree, um, the the estimates of the stadium crowd, and again, they have to be estimates because there weren't tickets for it, with the exception of the people that were on the field closest to the stage.
Yeah, I'm going to
And I
talk
think
about that one too.
well, but the the 45 to 50,000 estimate that you and I have both read and that we were a part of. What I thought was, I don't want to say it was humorous, but I mean, the stadium, yeah, they were selling T-shirts and they were selling hats. The one thing that I think that they kind of dropped the ball on, if I have to be critical of, is knowing how cold it was going to be, or that they probably should have anticipated it being. They didn't have all of the concession stands selling coffee and hot chocolate, because I'm sure you couldn't help but see those lines for people that were wanting to buy something hot or warm to try and help keep them or get them warm. Those things snaked all around the stadium concourse.
No, yeah.
Just because it was cold. I mean, it was 27 degrees and it wasn't, fortunately it wasn't snowing, and the wind wasn't blowing too bad. But like you said, you're used to working outside. I'm used to being outside at football games, but it was cold. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, and my wife was like, she was saying something about she wanted to get one of the I can't even say the word, but one of the special mugs, we'll call it, of the with the hot cocoa in it. I told her, I says, sure, says, go ahead, go stand in line. And she was like, what do you mean? I says, well, you're going to have to, wrap yourself around the stadium a couple times in order to find your place in line, because those were long lines.
So
and
what
I wasn't about to miss the celebration for some hot cocoa, I'll tell you that much.
Exactly. Exactly. So what was your critique about the 2,500 people on the field?
It wasn't so much, the people on the field. I'm sitting there at my computer at 10 o'clock, actually, 9:55 or whatever, ready to go, try to get the tickets. They went in 20 seconds. That's phenomenal. I've got no issues with that. Awesome job, Buckeye Nation. Just awesome job. I didn't get one. Oh, well. I can't blame anybody. It's the luck of the draw sometimes. But then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, something like that, I went on eBay just to see. How dare you people try to sell your tickets for $50 frickin' dollars?
Yeah.
I mean, I could see maybe 5, maybe 10 or something like that, but you're going to try to sell your tickets on the field for $50 on eBay. And if anybody bought them, shame on you. Shame on you.
That was not me.
Yeah, I was sitting in the stands, so I know it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But I mean, would I have loved to have been on the field? Yes. I mean, I've been on the field before, but not this field. But it used to have a track around it, so I have been on the field. That's how long ago I've been. It's been since I've been, on the field.
Right.
But I just read a post by somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they'd started talking about Buckeye Guy, and I don't know if you noticed Buckeye Guy there.
Oh, yeah, you can't help but see.
That dude is something else. He is such an attention hog. I just saw him grabbing people in order to take pictures. Like, hey, come take a picture with me. Hey, come, dude. Seriously, get over yourself. I
I
mean,
agree.
you're supposed to be a Buckeye fan, you know. I mean, a lot of people, you know, chastise Big Nut and all these other guys, but I've seen Big Nut doing, you know, charity work. Not to say that Buckeye guy doesn't do charity work because I don't know, so I can't, you know, comment on that. But I just, I mean, if you're going to try to do something and use your fame or whatever, try to use it for something useful.
Yeah, just a little side note. And I know we're kind of a family program here, but Kirk Barton has some interesting thoughts on Buckeye guy. That's all I'll say on, you know, if you're ever interested, you could look it up on Twitter and you might find some interesting some
Yeah,
interesting comments.
yeah.
And
It's just
that's all I'll say about Buckeye guy.
yeah. I mean, he's just sitting outside the stadium with his speakers blaring and everything like that, which is, you know, I understand it's kind of cool or whatever. But to think you're so special, you're going to take up, you know, the 5 or 6 parking spots, you know, just to blare your speakers and your little, you know, whatever, I forget what kind of car that is, that convertible he has, but I know I've seen it on the back of the tow truck because he thinks he's special to park in fire lanes.
Exactly.
But
Well,
speaking of that, also when I wish I would have went down to Columbus for it and I didn't get a chance to. I missed out on getting a selfie with the national championship trophy.
yeah. I mean, but again, you know, it's
I
the
mean,
kind of thing
it would have been
that
cool.
yeah, the just the line that I heard that when it was there, I think it was at a Walmart or something that I heard that was quite quite the spectacle there. The line, you know,
Yeah,
that's just that's what I was told by my buddy. But I thought without question the highlight of the entire celebration was all three quarterbacks, the Magnificent Three, as Coach
yep,
Meyer referred to them. And you know, since we're kind of coming up on the end of the podcast here, you know, definitely, you know, I am not going to sit here and say it's definitely going to be one player or the other because if there's one, I guess one thing that I learned from the 2014 Ohio State Buckeyes is to not necessarily take anything for granted. That things can be very unpredictable and change very rapidly. So it's going to be an interesting quarterback uh, competition. That remains, you know, remains to be seen how it's going to work out. But it's going to be an interesting quarterback competition to keep an eye and ear out for as the Ohio State Buckeyes for 2015 began winter conditioning today, from what I read.
yeah. You know, the thing that you know, they say that body language is 65% of what a person says. I think it is, if I remember that stat from high school, that's how long ago it was. Just one of them, you know, cornucopia of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
idiocies that stick in your head. If you watched Braxton Miller's body language during that whole thing, not just what he said, no matter what, I don't care who's saying what, he's that man is not transferring. He's not going anywhere. He has too much love for the Ohio State University, and he has too much love for his teammates.
I agree. I
And I
agree.
mean, I just, you know, whatever the case may be, you know, we'll find out, you know, some of it in spring ball, although I don't think Braxton's going to be able to throw in spring ball. But, yeah, it's going to be very interesting with the three-headed monster that's, you know, but if there's anybody that's going to be able to figure it out, it's Coach Urban Meyer.
I agree. Do we want to offer a teaser for next Wednesday? What we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, next Wednesday we're going to be discussing the recruiting. We will be, you know, that will be after that's post National Signing Day. So we will talk with Jeremiah, myself, and Chip, and hopefully we will have a special guest on, aka the Boss. And in order to find out who that is, you have to turn in. But
All right.
also, don't forget, mark your calendars, ladies and gentlemen. February 16th, President's Day. I have that day off, so I will be at my computer. Spring ball tickets go on sale.
That's right.
So, you get tickets for the lacrosse game against Maryland, which I will be at because the lacrosse game against Michigan last year, I tell you what, the lacrosse is kind of a fun game to watch. So I'm going to get there early in order to make sure I got good seats, but I'm getting my tickets. And I believe the spring game is April 18th.
You've got that right.
And
Absolutely.
see, I've got a memory.
Yeah, see, I'll tell you what, Ed Warrener made a point of thanking the fans at the national championship celebration, and as soon as he said, I hope to see all of you here for the spring game, April 18th, on cue up on the Jumbotron or whatever it might be called at Ohio Stadium. They, as Shannon just referenced, they cued the fact that spring game tickets will be on sale on February 16th, and that the game is April 18th. And Shannon, I promise you, in some way, shape, or form, that when it comes to the spring game, I the Minnick family routine is to usually go down, like I said, as a family with my wife and kids. So I'm not much of a lacrosse fan, but that might be the perfect way to meet up with you, prior to to the actual football spring game.
Well, now that I have the technology figured out, and to some of the ones that were hoping for my live stream of the national championship celebration, I'm sorry. I apologize for my technical difficulties that were all on my end for not following through on things. But now that I have that figured out, maybe we could do some podcasting from the spring game, or do some live streaming or something. When we meet up, or get some other Men of Scarlet and Gray writers that
Yeah,
go there, and we can meet up and have a discussion, what we're seeing, what we saw, figure something out. So
yeah,
that'd be a little teaser for our listeners in the future.
absolutely.
All right, Buckeye Nation, that's going to be the end of this podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, you can find us at iTunes and Stitcher. um, you could follow Mr. Chip Minnick at Chip Minnick on Twitter. You can follow myself at SM Summers, SOMMERS 84 on Twitter. Love talking to Buckeye fans, even love talking to other teams' fans and stuff, and interact. So give us a follow. Anything you want to leave with?
I just want to say sorry for the lengthy hiatus, from obviously from the end of the regular season, but hopefully Shannon and I made it up to all of you loyal listeners by kind of reliving the glorious times of the Big Ten Championship, the Sugar Bowl, the National Championship, and the National Championship celebration. Looking forward to, if not necessarily on a weekly basis, having the opportunity to like next Wednesday, talk about the incoming recruits for 2015 and beyond, and looking forward to this wonderful cycle of Ohio State football beginning again, because I think, as we all would agree, Ohio State football and college football in general is truly turned into a year-long obsession.
I agree, and I'm hoping that maybe do some talking with everybody about some Buckeye basketball. And got a big game this Thursday against Maryland, and hoping for they win that one, and I think it's going to solidify them a spot in the big dance. Just my opinion right now, but we can talk more about that later.
Alrighty, man.
All right, thank you for listening, Buckeye Nation. We'll go out with our favorite song.
Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.